I hope you have your thinking caps on today because the video may become a bit technical. I'm John Holmes, your purveyor of parts breaking power, and today's video is going to go over brushed motor timing, rotation, and speed matching of pairs for guys that want to compete with motor on axle style rigs. Now, probably just want to start out with some of the basics. And the rotation of a brushed motor is pretty relative to how you look at it. So we could be looking at the shaft in the direction that it's rotating, this way or that way, or we could be looking at the backside and, conceptually looking at internally how things are spinning. Pretty much standard for the entire RC car industry, fortunately, is looking at from the pinion side and essentially just watching the pinion spin. So standard rotation, forward rotation, or just a regular old brushed motor, or brushless, would have a counterclockwise shaft when viewed from this side. So counterclockwise is standard in the industry. Reverse direction motor, or rear for motor on axle style rigs, such as Clodbuster, Berg, etc., would be the the clockwise rotation direction. So looking at the pinion, it rotates clockwise. Now there are mostly rigs in the crawler scene that use regular rotation motors, forward rotation motors. However, with the advent of the axial wraith, we found out that sometimes they throw a reverse rotation motor in there, and maybe they don't tell you that. So it's up to guys like me to figure that out, why guys are smoking motors, or just why it's not performing like it should. And come to find out, the Wraith has a reverse rotation motor, not the Poison Spider version, but just the regular Wraith. And Traxxas is coming out with a scale vehicle very soon that also looks to have a reverse rotation motor. You may have a reverse rotation motor in your rig if you build one custom. Let's say you have a transfer case in there beyond your transmission. Let's say you turn your transmission around backwards, or in the case of axial rigs, you can actually build the transmission in a mirrored fashion where the motor plate sits on the opposite side of the transmission. So there's a lot of different ways. Actually, the axial wraith, you can switch your ring and pinion to be one way or the other. So it would be like left side, right side drive of the pinion on the ring gear. And that also reverses rotation direction of the rig or of the motor to get the rig to go forwards. So there's really a lot of reasons why you may need a reverse rotation motor or a forward rotation motor and why you should know the difference between the two. At any rate, you'll be able to set your timing properly on adjustable motors and ensure that your motor has the best power, torque, and longevity possible. So let's get down to it. What I have here is two Torque Master BR Minis, and for the sake of today's demonstration, I'm just using a little servo tester instead of a radio so that I can kind of set it and forget it. But if you need to set low amounts of throttle for the same purposes I'm using in this video, you can actually tape your throttle back a little bit on the rig, or if you have a pretty wide adjustment on your neutral trim setting, plug in your rig, let it arm, and then you can adjust the little potentiometer on your radio to give yourself a little bit of forward or reverse bias. Usually you want a little bit more throttle than the potentiometer can give, so just tape your throttle back a little bit and it'll give you some throttle there for your motors to do tests on. So we will start. I'm just using a 2-cell lithium battery for demonstration purposes. It's a little less likely to cause big problems when it's a small battery. So the speed controller's bing bing twice, letting us know it's a 2-cell battery, and then it went through the arming sequence because my servo driver was in the neutral position. As we start to spin the motors, I've got two motors hooked up right now. We're starting in the regular rotation or forward rotation. This is counterclockwise. And you can see that these motors aren't exactly spinning up at the same time. It can actually be a little difficult between radio programming, the motors themselves, and ESC settings to get motors to start up identically all the time. However, the higher quality hand-wound motors are a little easier to get this. We can hear both of these motors trying to start up. So in this case, it's probably just a little difference between the motors, maybe the age of the motors, one of the springs maybe not quite fully seated, or maybe a brush is hanging on this motor and it's just not quite starting up as soon as the other one is. So this would be reverse rotation. Let's see if we can get it nice and slow for you. That's reverse, and then back again to forwards rotation. There we go, forwards rotation. Get them both going forwards. Whee! All right, so we've defined our forwards and reverse rotation now. Now, what is rotation of the motor determined by? Rotation is really relative to the polarity of everything. You have a magnetic field of both north and south pole to the motor magnets. You have the electrical field, so you could apply voltage one way or the other way to the motor. And then there's also generally some visual colors for indication on the motors. On this one you can see the little red dot. Let's see, we'll pull it up closer to the camera for you. You can see the little red dot on this fixed timing can, which we would not be able to adjust timing on that side, and no indicator on this side. So this would be the positive for regular or forward rotation. Now, these are non-adjustable sealed can styles. Two versions of this, Trailmaster Sport 540 and 550. Now we are using black cans, but our first run was silver can. So just keep an eye out for those differences if you're buying some new motors. Now, what we will be talking about and what you will need to adjust your timing on is this style of motor, which is a rebuildable style. And it has the external springs and brushes visible. You will typically have 2 screws on the end bell that you can loosen and then adjust the timing. So I'll just show that to you while it's in my hand. Do not take these screws all the way out. It can be a pain to put them back. Alright, so just about a turn on each, and it loosens up the end bell enough to where we can rotate it back and forth. Now let's see if I can get this camera to focus close on the lens so that we can see. There we go. We have a straight timing mark with a little 0 in the can indented into it. And the middle timing mark that lines up with our screw indicates 0 timing, in an ideal world at least. So this would be 0 timing. And if our pinion is spinning counterclockwise, we would need to advance the timing in the reverse rotation of the shaft. So it's just like timing a car. So you would rotate against the shaft rotation. On a rebuildable motor, such as our TorqueMaster or Crawlmaster series, each mark indicates 12 degrees of timing. For a crawler, you really don't want to go past 12 degrees. So anywhere between 6 and 12, this would be 6, kind of halfway in between. There we go. There's 6 degrees. There's 12 degrees. And since I'm putting this back on the shelf, I'm going to just set it back to 0. Now, on this one, I should note that we have that little timing mark as indicated, and there is not one on the other side of the can. Our newer sticker design, you can't see those marks anymore, but we have marked for you on the sticker. So you would just use the little center hash mark, same way. For forwards rotation, you would go to, let's say, 12 degrees. And for reverse rotation, you would go in this direction for, let's say, 12 degrees. Now, when you listen to the motor, when timing is advanced from 0, it will spin faster. And so if you get confused on which way the timing needs to go for your rotation of direction, then you really just need to listen to the motor and loosen the screws a little bit, apply a small amount of voltage to it, and then spin your end bell one way and the other. And what you want to listen for is a little increase in RPM and not a decrease. If you have a puller motor, which I designed for competition crawlers, it's a much smaller case. You can see the physical size difference between a regular 540 and our 500. Uses neodymium magnets, much higher strength than a regular one. It uses a very similar method for timing adjustment. So we just loosen these screws right here and here, and then we would rotate our timing. The way that this one is made, you can't go past 12 degrees. So let's just look down the barrel of this. There would be 12 in the forward direction, and there would be 12 degrees in the negative direction on an ideal motor. Now what may happen is that the 0 mark isn't exactly in that center, and the reason that that may be is that there's variations in the manufacturer of a motor. Some of the issues or variations that we may see is that the commutator may not be lined up quite straight with the laminations on your rotor or your armature. And so what that'll cause is some artificial tweaking of your timing. So it may be advanced, it may be retarded timing, depending on which way that gets tweaked and which direction of rotation that you're needing for your rig. So that's one area where there may be a little bit of variation. The magnets themselves can actually have a little bit of variation to them, or maybe they're not placed in the can quite square. One way or the other, there can be some variation to the magnets that will cause your electrical 0 timing to be slightly shifted from your mechanical 0 as you would normally expect it. Now, there's another issue that there could be, and let's say when we put our sticker on that we didn't line it up exactly on there. So, you know, maybe it's just off by a hair. That would also cause your timing to, at least visually, be out of whack. So what we really need to understand is when you're setting the timing on a motor, you may have a good idea of where to start, but that may not actually be where 0 is. And when that's the case, then we just need to figure it out, essentially. And the easiest way to do that is to spin it up and listen to it and figure out which way our timing is advanced by a faster sounding motor, or which way that our timing is retarded by a slower sounding motor. So what I'm going to do is pull these out and just kind of show you. All right, so let's say we have two completely unknown motors. They're not marked. They're not anything. Now, before you disassemble any motor, it's always a good idea to mark on the end bell where it's sitting. And the reason to mark them is so you don't lose track of where it is, and you at least have yourself a reference mark to put them back together. So in the case of these that do not have case stickers, you know, we really don't know where we would be starting otherwise, except for our little hash mark that is still on that can. See if I can get the light to bounce off of it just right. There we go. So these do have the hash mark, but in the case of the puller cans, maybe it doesn't have that. Fortunately for you, I engineered these to where you don't have any other options as far as installation. You basically put the end bell on, and that's the only position that it goes in. You get forwards and you get reverse, and you don't have anything in between. But on something like this, when we loosen this end bell, it'll rotate 180 degrees, which is one way that you can reverse your motor. So we could be anywhere, you know. It's quite possible that errors could be made otherwise. So let's say that you install your motor and it's the wrong direction. Hopefully you would check it before you install it into a vehicle. But let's just try it out here. Single motor going into a vehicle. I need forwards rotation for this fictitious vehicle. So we want to make sure that the green light, which indicates forward, is flashing on the ESC. and then we spool her up. Hey, look at there. She's going forwards. This one would be essentially ready to install, but I'm going to want to add a little bit of forward timing first, because 6 to 12 degrees gives us best motor life and performance. So I'll start at 0 and actually just spool her up and let you listen to it. A little higher there, a little higher pitch. 12 degrees, 0 degrees, negative 12 degrees. You can hear it going down. The only way to really check where 0 is at minimum amp draw. But as long as that we know that it is spinning faster, then we know we're advanced a little bit. So it's really good enough for the average user. You don't have to pull out the amp meter. All right, so we've got this one at positive 12. Let's go ahead and pretend that we're installing this into something like a Cloudbuster or a Berg or any of the other motor on axle rigs. So we've got our front at 12 degrees, and now we need to get our rear spinning in reverse. This will be fun. So, same as last time, we're going to spool this up, make sure that our ESC is blinking green for forwards. And let's see which way it goes. Ah, this is still set up as forwards rotation. Now we have a choice. We can either reverse the wires, we can flip the end bell 180 degrees on the can, which could be useful if it's already installed and you don't want to desolder it, or, well, that's pretty much the two best ways to do it, so we'll just stick with that. On this one, I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees. Since it's still plugged in, we'll keep it nice and red to red, black to black. So this will be a reverse rotation motor when we pay attention to the color polarity. So turn that guy 180 degrees, and we do have some timing marks on the back. We'll get that camera to pick it up here. All right. So the back side of the end bell also has those timing marks, but since it's going to be reverse rotation, we actually don't have anything to go off of. So we're going in the other direction from what is marked. So end bell is rotating in this direction because the shaft will be rotating the opposite direction. And that's what advanced timing is. The timing is before the commutation. For neutral at 0 at least. So advanced timing is commutating before we would be at electrical 0. Now when we spin this up, it should, in theory, spin in the opposite direction. There we are. Green light in the background. Reverse rotation motor. Now finally, what we want to do for our fictitious motor on axle vehicle is to make sure that we have a speed matched pair. And this is important for the handling of the vehicle. You want to make sure that your front motor is at least as fast as your rear, if not slightly faster. And this is so that the rear is not constantly pushing around the rig from the back. It causes really funky handling, can really upset the suspension on these light rigs. And so we want to make sure that we have a nice matched pair. Now, I used to do this with a dyno, went really into it for my team, and then come to find out, hey, we don't actually need them to be very matched as far as the exact efficiency or the total torque that it can produce, as long as they're still good motors within the lot and not some outliers that are, just really bad. All we need to do is make sure that they're very close in speed to each other, or with the front motor going slightly faster. And we can do this with a tachometer, but it's honestly a lot easier to just do it by sound. As long as you can hear. You're listening to this video, so we can make assumptions that you can hear. So let's see if these are speed matched. This is the rear motor. Front. That sounds a little bit higher pitch. So this pair would actually be good for install. But let's make it a little more obvious to the ear. So I'm going to pull the rear motor back closer to 0 timing. See if we can get that. So a little closer. Now, let's listen. Definitely faster on the other motor. Right, so that is definitely the easiest way to speed match motors, in my opinion. Just make sure that the front one is spinning a little bit faster. Generally, that will mean a little bit more timing advance on there, but not always. Like I said, sometimes there's going to be variations to the magnets or the armature or the way that the brushes are sitting to where your reverse motor may look like it's at basically 0 and your front motor may also be at 0, but it still spins faster. Or it could be vice versa, to where your front motor is just barely at 6 degrees, but to get that rear motor to be slower but not be in the retarded direction, you would end up, way over here. So you can pay attention more so to how they sound than anything else. But when it's a rebuildable style like this, and when it's a puller style that only has a little bit of freedom of movement off the end bell, you can pretty much go by the timing marks and not worry about the fine details of it too much. That's really a job for myself instead of anyone else. So I think that covers about everything that I wanted to cover. Ended up being a much longer video than I anticipated. But if you have any questions that I didn't cover, feel free to comment down below and let me know what else you got, and I will see if we can cover it for you on the next video. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.